I've worked as a freelance land surveyor for years, the kind of job that sends you deep into places where no one else goes. Days alone, no signal, no backup, just you and the wilderness. I used to enjoy that isolation. The silence felt peaceful, until it didn't. This happened a few years ago, on a job in the mountains near Clearwater, Idaho. An area so remote it took nearly 6 miles of hiking just to reach my campsite. Like always, I logged my route with the ranger station, packed enough supplies for a week, and headed out alone. The first day went exactly as planned. I located a few boundary markers, documented everything, and made it back before dark. The weather matched the forecast: cold, with light snow, nothing unusual. At that point, it felt like just another routine job. Quiet, predictable, safe. But that feeling didn't last long, because by the next day, something started to change. And looking back now, that was the moment everything began to go wrong. By the second day, everything started to feel off. The snowfall picked up far beyond what had been predicted, covering the ground in a thick, deceptive layer that hid everything underneath. Rocks, dips, uneven terrain, it was all buried. The next marker I needed to check wasn't far, maybe a mile out, and instead of playing it safe, I convinced myself it was worth it. Just one more, then I'd head back. That decision still bothers me. Looking back, I had every reason to stop. The weather was turning, visibility was dropping, and the terrain was becoming unpredictable. But I pushed forward anyway. Each step felt uncertain, like the ground beneath me could shift at any moment. It was the kind of environment where one small mistake could spiral into something much worse. And that's exactly what happened. And before I tell you what happened next, subscribe if you enjoy unsettling true stories like this. Because what happens next only gets more intense. I was making my way down a small slope, moving carefully, testing each step, when my foot suddenly slipped. I never even saw what caused it. One second I was steady, the next I was sliding. Fast. I couldn't stop myself. I went down hard, skidding across the snow until I slammed into something solid and managed to grab onto a tree root. Everything went still. For a moment, I just stayed there, catching my breath, trying to process what had just happened. I knew how bad that could have been, if I hadn't stopped when I did. I don't like thinking about where I might have ended up. Then, the pain hit. Sharp. Immediate. My right ankle. I tried to ignore it at first, telling myself it wasn't serious. But the moment I stood up, I knew that wasn't true. Putting weight on it sent a jolt through my leg that I couldn't ignore. I wasn't going anywhere fast, not like that. That's when reality set in. I was alone. Injured. And further out than I should have been. There was no more debating it. No more, just one more marker. I dropped the job right there. Nothing out there was worth risking getting stuck in those conditions. The only thing that mattered now was getting back. I forced myself back up to the main trail, each step slower than the last, trying to keep weight off my ankle as much as possible. The pain was sharp but manageable. I just needed to make it back to camp. A few minutes in, I noticed something that immediately stood out. Boot prints. They came from the trees off to my left and merged onto the trail ahead of me, heading in the same direction. What bothered me wasn't just that they were there, it was how fresh they looked. Even with the snow falling, the edges were still clean and defined. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe a hunter, maybe someone checking the land. It wasn't impossible, even out here. So I kept moving, telling myself not to overthink it. But as the light started fading, something else crept in. I began to hear it faint at first, almost easy to ignore. Footsteps. Behind me. I tried to convince myself it was just the forest, branches shifting under snow, the wind moving through the trees. But the longer I listened, the more it sounded deliberate, measured, like someone matching my pace. I stopped walking. The sound didn't stop right away. There was a delay, just a second or two, then silence. That was enough. My chest tightened as I stood there, listening, but all I could hear now was the wind. So I started walking again, slower this time, more aware. For a moment, nothing. I almost believed I imagined it. Then it came back. Same rhythm, same distance. And every time I turned around, there was nothing there. That was the part that really got to me. If it was an animal, I couldn't see it. If it was a person, they didn't want to be seen. And with my ankle the way it was, running wasn't an option. I kept moving anyway, trying not to panic, trying to focus on getting back. Then, suddenly, something else broke the silence. A faint metallic sound from somewhere off to my left, and that made even less sense. I couldn't make sense of the sound at all. It was faint, metallic, like something lightly tapping against metal somewhere in the trees. That alone didn't sit right. There shouldn't have been anything out there except snow and forest. No equipment, no structures, nothing that could make a sound like that. And the more I thought about it, the worse it felt. That's when I realized something that made my stomach drop. I hadn't been watching those footprints anymore. I looked down quickly, and they were gone. Just gone. No sign of where they turned, no break in the trail, nothing. I spun around, scanning the snow behind me, trying to figure out where they could have disappeared to, but there was no clear answer. It was like they had just stopped existing. That didn't make sense. So I looked toward the trees on my left, the direction that sound had come from, and that's when I saw it. Another set of footprints. Not on the trail this time, but running through the snow just inside the tree line, parallel to mine. Close. Way too close. Whoever had been ahead of me before wasn't ahead anymore. They were moving alongside me, keeping pace, hidden, just out of sight between the trees. That's when the fear really hit. My thoughts started racing, trying to piece together what was happening, but none of it made sense. I should have kept walking. I should have stayed quiet and just gotten out of there, but I didn't. I stopped, then called out, asked if someone was there. Nothing answered me. No voice, no movement, just silence pressing in from all sides. I stood there for a few seconds that felt way longer than they should have, and then it clicked. I needed to leave. Now, but my ankle was still slowing me down, every step painful, every movement awkward. I wanted to run. My body was telling me to run, but I couldn't, and that might have been the most terrifying part of all. I knew I wasn't far from camp, and that was the only thing keeping me moving. Step by step, I kept telling myself the same thing, just get back, and everything will be fine. The footsteps had stopped, or at least I couldn't hear them anymore, but that didn't make me feel better. If anything, it made it worse, because I knew someone had been out there, and they hadn't just disappeared. Then I heard it, a sharp crack behind me, not subtle, not natural. It sounded like a heavy branch snapping under pressure, deliberate, loud enough to echo through the trees. I didn't turn around. I didn't even slow down. At that point, I wasn't trying to understand what was happening anymore. I just needed to get out. By the time I reached camp, it was completely dark. I got inside my tent as fast as I could, zipped it shut, and for a brief second, I thought I was safe. But that feeling didn't last, because the moment everything went quiet, it hit me. I was just as exposed in that tent as I had been out in the open. Thin fabric, no protection, no real barrier between me and whatever had followed me back. I started packing immediately. Every movement felt slow, clumsy. My ankle made it worse, forcing me to rush while knowing I couldn't move fast if something went wrong. And that thought kept looping in my head: if this turned into a chase, I wouldn't stand a chance. Then I heard it, right outside. Footsteps. Close. Too close. Not approaching, not retreating, just moving, circling, slowly, methodically, around the tent. I froze, barely breathing, listening as each step pressed into the snow just a few feet away. I couldn't see anything through the fabric, but I could feel it, something out there, moving with intention, taking its time. Seconds stretched into minutes, or at least it felt like minutes. Then suddenly, it stopped. And somehow, the silence that followed felt even worse. If this story is getting under your skin, stay with me, because the worst part was still ahead. Stay with me, because this isn't the worst part yet. No footsteps, no sound, just silence. And somehow, that was even worse. I never heard him leave. No footsteps fading, no sign of movement, just silence pressing in from every direction. But at that point, I didn't care anymore. Staying there felt worse than whatever was waiting outside. So I finished packing, took a breath that didn't steady me at all, and unzipped the tent. The cold hit instantly. I stepped out, and that's when I saw him, standing just beyond the tree line, watching me. I froze. He looked wrong. Not just old, but worn down, like something had drained the life out of him. His posture, his stillness, it didn't feel natural, and the way he stared, it wasn't curiosity. It wasn't confusion. It was something else. I raised my hands without even thinking and told him I didn't want any trouble. My voice didn't sound like mine. He didn't react, didn't move, didn't blink. We just stood there, staring at each other across the snow. I was waiting for him to rush me, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. Then, after what felt way too long, he finally spoke. "You're a lucky man." That was it. No explanation. No tone. Just those words. And then he turned and walked back into the trees like he had never been there at all. I didn't wait. I didn't question it. I grabbed what I could and left, not caring about the dark, not caring about anything except getting out of that place. With my ankle the way it was, I knew how bad that could have gone if things were even slightly different. Later, I found out it was a severe sprain. I reported what happened, but nothing ever came from it. No one found anything. No one followed up. I still do this kind of work. I still go out into remote areas, but not like before. I don't go alone in the winter anymore, and I never ignore that feeling when something isn't right, because that night proved one thing to me sometimes. You don't realize how close you were until it's already over. But as terrifying as that was, it wasn't the only story that stayed with me. I've lived in Alaska most of my life. My family moved to Fairbanks when I was a kid, and I never really left. I grew up around the outdoors, spent my summers working remote camps, and by my early 20s, I was guiding full-time. At this point, I've seen enough out there that not much rattles me anymore. Or at least, that's what I used to believe. Because a few years ago, something happened that made me question that completely. At the time, I was with my boyfriend Randy. He was just as experienced as I was, maybe more, especially when it came to winter travel. The kind of person you trust without thinking twice. We'd been together for years, and most of that time was spent doing things most people wouldn't even consider long backcountry trips, where one bad decision could turn serious fast. This trip was supposed to be routine. We planned to snowmobile between two remote cabins, about 60 miles apart. Stay a night at each, then head back. We'd done the exact same route before without any issues. The forecast looked clear. Conditions seemed stable. Nothing felt out of place. The first day went perfectly. We reached the second cabin before evening. Ate, relaxed, even joked around. It felt easy, normal, and that's what made the next morning so unsettling. Because when I woke up, everything had changed. The storm hit hard. No warning, no gradual buildup, just full whiteout conditions. Wind tearing through the trees, snow blowing sideways so thick you could barely see ahead of you. It didn't match anything we had checked before leaving. We could have waited it out. We should have waited, but we didn't. We decided to push through. Visibility was terrible, so Randy took the lead, and I followed his tracks, focusing on keeping up and staying upright. It felt risky, but manageable, until it wasn't. 1 second, everything was steady. The next, he was gone. His snowmobile had flipped, and he was trapped underneath it. I jumped off mine and ran to him, heart racing, already knowing something was wrong. And when I saw the way he was injured, I knew this wasn't something we could just push through. It was bad. Bad enough that everything changed in an instant. The plan, the route, the confidence we had walking into this, all of it was gone. And now, we were stuck out there, in the middle of a storm that wasn't supposed to exist. The structure I found didn't look like any of the cabins we had planned for. It was smaller, uneven, half buried in snow like it had been there far longer than it should have. But there was smoke rising from the chimney, and a faint light glowing inside. And out there, in those conditions, that only meant one thing: someone was inside. Someone who might have a radio, or at least warmth. I didn't hesitate. I cut the engine and pushed through the snow toward the door, already thinking about how fast I could get help. I knocked, expecting an answer right away. Nothing. I knocked again. Still nothing. That should have been enough to make me leave. But it wasn't. The door wasn't locked. When I stepped inside, the warmth hit me immediately. A fire was going in the stove. There was a bedroll on the floor, a half-eaten meal nearby like whoever lived there had just stepped out seconds ago, but no one answered when I called out. The silence inside that cabin felt wrong. I tried my phone again, nothing. No signal, no connection, no help. And as much as I didn't want to step back out into that storm, I knew I had to. Randy didn't have time. I turned to leave, and that's when I noticed something on a shelf. A pair of binoculars, a folded map, and a notebook. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The map showed the exact area we'd been traveling through. Sections were circled, marked, studied. And then I saw at both of the cabins we had stayed at, circled too, with dates written beside them. Multiple dates, not just recent ones. I opened the notebook, and that's when everything changed. It wasn't random notes. It was people, descriptions, movements, clothing, directions. Someone had been watching travelers out here, tracking them. And in that moment, the cabin stopped feeling like shelter. It felt like something else, like I had just walked into the wrong place at the worst possible time. I dropped everything and headed straight for the door. And then I heard it, a scream, loud, sudden, coming from beneath me. from under the floor. It didn't sound distant. It didn't sound unclear. It sounded real. It sounded real, like someone right below me calling out in absolute panic. I didn't think. I ran. I burst out of that cabin, jumped onto the snowmobile, and took off without even looking back. I didn't care about direction, didn't care about anything except getting away from that place. I never saw that cabin again. I don't even remember most of what happened after that. At some point, I reached the actual cabin and managed to get through on the emergency radio. Rescue had to be flown in just to reach Randy. He was barely holding on, but he survived, physically. But those hours, everything that happened out there, that's something I still can't fully put into words. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to. Randy made it out alive, but something in him changed after that. He never wanted anything to do with winter travel again. And honestly, I didn't blame him. I told everyone I could about that cabin, about what I heard beneath the floor, and I pushed hard for someone to go back out there and check. Eventually, they said a team had been sent, but when they came back, they told me something I still can't accept. They couldn't find anything. No cabin, no structure, nothing that matched what I described. One of them even suggested I imagine the whole thing, that I was exhausted, disoriented, that my mind filled in the gaps. I didn't take that well, and the truth is, I still don't know what to believe. There are only a few ways to make sense of what happened out there, and none of them sit right. The first is the simplest and maybe the hardest to accept, that none of it was real, that I was overwhelmed, freezing, terrified, and my mind created something that felt completely real, a place that didn't exist, a scream that never happened. It sounds impossible, but I can't fully rule it out. The second possibility is worse. That cabin was real, and that sound may have come from someone in serious danger, someone I may have left behind. Maybe the search team missed it. Maybe they didn't look hard enough. Or maybe they weren't meant to find it. Either way, if that was real, then I walked away from something I should have faced. And then there's the last possibility, the one I try not to think about. What if it wasn't random? What if that place was meant to be found? The smoke, the light, the notebook, filled with details about people passing through that area. It didn't feel accidental. It felt deliberate, like someone had been watching, waiting, keeping track. And if that's true, then that scream I heard, it might not have been the first. And if I had arrived just a little earlier, I don't know what I might have found down there. I still think about it more than I'd like to admit. Because no matter which explanation you choose, none of them are good. And strangely enough, that wasn't the first time I'd walked away from something I still couldn't explain. When I was in high school, there was this girl I couldn't stop thinking about. Her name was Sienna Rollins. It wasn't just that she was attractive, there was something else about her. Something distant, unreadable. She didn't talk much, didn't smile, and most people found her strange. But to me, that only made her more interesting. Being around her felt different, like everything got quieter, like the world slowed down in a way I couldn't explain. I used to write a lot back then, and without even realizing it, I started using her name in my stories. One day, I mentioned it out loud, and somehow, she heard. She smirked, said something teasing, and started to walk away. I don't know what came over me, but I asked her out right there. I expected her to ignore me, but she didn't. She said yes, handed me her number, and left like it was nothing. That's how I ended up going on a hike with her. The whole thing was her idea. She picked the trail, set the time, planned everything. I didn't question it. I was just excited to be there. The drive felt short, even though it wasn't. And when we arrived, she didn't hesitate, just started walking, like she already knew exactly where she was going. At first, everything felt normal. Better than normal. She actually talked to me, asked about my writing, listened, responded. It felt like I was finally getting to know her. But the deeper we went, the quieter it got. The trail narrowed, the trees closed in, and we stopped seeing other people entirely. Then we reached a fork. I asked which way to go, and without hesitation, she pointed left. Said she'd never been there before, but she didn't sound unsure. That stuck with me, even if I didn't say anything. After a while, something felt off. I realized I couldn't hear her footsteps behind me anymore. I turned around, and she was gone. Just gone. No sound, no movement, no sign of where she could have gone. I called her name, walked back to the fork, checked both directions. Nothing. No side paths. No place she could have stepped off to. It didn't make sense. Trying to stay calm, I took the other path, thinking maybe we got split up somehow. But that trail felt wrong immediately. Overgrown, uneven, like no one had been there in a long time. I kept calling out, hoping she'd answer. That's when I heard something. A branch snapping somewhere off to my left. Then movement. Something shifting behind a tree. For a split second, I thought it was her just messing with me. That felt like something she would do. So I decided to play along. I moved quietly, crept closer, and jumped out to surprise her. But it wasn't her. It was a man. Close enough that I could see his expression, and it wasn't surprised. Not even a little. I froze, stepped back, tried to explain I was looking for my friend, but he didn't react. He just stared, and then started moving toward me. That's when I heard something else. Another sound, this time from my right. I turned and saw a second person standing there, out in the open, watching me. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't pretending. And in that moment, something clicked. This wasn't random. I ran. I didn't think, didn't look back. I just ran. Through trees, through brush, anywhere that wasn't there. I could hear them behind me, moving faster now, not even trying to be quiet. I stumbled, hit the ground, felt someone catch hold of me for a second, but somehow I got free and kept going. I didn't stop until I reached the trail. Then I didn't stop until I reached the parking lot. Her car was still there, but she wasn't. That's when panic really set in. I thought something had happened to her. I tried calling over and over, no answer. I was seconds away from calling for help when my phone buzzed. A message from her, asking where I went. And then I saw her, walking out of the trees, calm, unbothered, like nothing had happened. I tried to explain, tried to tell her what I saw, but she didn't react the way I expected. If anything, she seemed annoyed. Said she thought I had walked ahead without her. Said she was trying to catch up. I knew that wasn't true. There was no way I could have missed her. And the more I thought about it, the less it felt like a coincidence. The trail she chose, the direction she picked, the moment she disappeared, and the exact place those two men showed up. It all lined up too perfectly. We never saw each other again after that. And to this day, I still don't know what really happened out there. But sometimes I wonder if I was ever supposed to make it back at all. If stories like this stay with you, don't forget to subscribe. And if you've ever experienced something you still can't explain, share it below or check the description. Some of the most unsettling stories come from people just like you.